have an address to the lassies, which will then be followed by a reply from the lassies. Many of you will remember this from previous Burns suppers. Every year is unique. Every year someone brings their own personality and experience to the address, and I think this is always a real highlight because
She
you
wants
never
to leave,
know
I'm not going to
what
argue
to
with
say.
it.
So, I would like to introduce to you Steve Cohen, a dear neighbor of ours. Welcome, Steve. And Steve will be giving the address to the immortal memory of Robert Burns. Steve.
So this is 2026. It's also after 7 o'clock here, which means in Alloway, Scotland. In Alloway, Scotland, it is now after midnight. So it is the official birthday of Robert Burns. So 2026 is the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, the Declaration of Independence, which Robert Burns found magical. It was throwing off of the shackles of a king, King George III, which, as a young man of 17, must have been amazing. So, I'm going to give an American view of Robert Burns. And starting with the centenary address given by Ralph Waldo Emerson, January 25th, 1859 in Boston. And I'm going to abbreviate it, but he started with, "His was the music to whose tone the common pulse of man keeps time." And Ralph Waldo Emerson then said that, that at the first announcement that the 25th of January was the 100th anniversary of the birth of Robert Burns, a sudden consent warmed through the English race in all its kingdoms, colonies, and states all over the world. What can explain the singular unanimity in a race which rarely acts together, but rather after their watchword, each for himself? But it is Burns that brought them together, and their love for Robert Burns. And his destiny, when you look at, in order for his destiny, his birth, breeding, and fortunes were low. His organic sentiment was absolute independence and resting, as it should, on a life of labor. So he is an exceptional genius. The people who care nothing for literature and poetry care for Burns. It was indifferent, they thought, who saw him, whether he wrote verse or not. He could have done anything else as well, but how true a poet is he. And the poet, too, of poor men, of Gray, Hodden, and the Guernsey coat and the blouse. He has given voice to all the experiences of common life. He has endeared the farmhouse and cottage, patches and poverty, beans and barley, ale, the poor man's wine, hardship, the fear of debt, the dear society of weans and wife, of brothers and sisters, proud of each other. He told us the world of the landscape which the poor see around them, bleak leagues of pasture and stubble, ice and sleet and rain and snow-choked brooks, birds, hares, field mice, thistles and heather, which he dearly knew. And as he was thus the poet of the poor, anxious, cheerful, working humanity, too he had the language of low life. He grew up in a rural district, speaking a patois unintelligible to all but natives, and he has made the lowland Scotch a Doric dialect of fame. Is the only example in history of a single man who could make the language real, and by the genius of Robert Burns. But more than this, he had the secret of genius to draw from the bottom of society, the strength of its speech, and astonish the ears of the polite. So, that is what a brief thing of what Emerson said. But let's think back and imagine Robert Burns, age 37. It's July 1796. George Washington is still president of the United States, and Robert Burns is dying, and he knows it. And his wife is about to give birth to their 13th child, and not many of which lived past the age of 3 or 4. Only a few made it to age 10, in which case they lived a good life. But imagine him in a fever dream, and he probably may have thought of America. And what if he thought, and he was transported here to the grub farm, and he'd be looking around and saying, this place looks just like the where I grew up in Alloway and Ayrshire. And Mr. Grubb told him, no, this is Alloway's over there in Salem County, New Jersey. So, but then he disappears again and reappears talking about the speech just given by Emerson in Boston on January 25th, 1859. And now he's here inside this barn in 1859. And he looks around and he smells the hay. And he hears the baying of the cows downstairs, the dairy cows, and the rustle of the field mice. And he recites his poem to the mouse. So then suddenly he disappears and reappears again. It's July 4th, 1910. And the barn has been transferred into a dance floor. And there are people here. And the rafters are decorated, and there's lights in here, and he is stunned. And then he hears the voice of a man named Frank. And Frank starts talking about Shakespeare, and he says, we're in the village of Arden. And he said, that must be from As You Like It, from Shakespeare. And Frank talks about that they're going to start holding the town meetings here where everybody can vote, including tenants, because everybody's a tenant here. There's no landowners who control everything. It's everyone has a vote, including women. Unbelievable. And he then looks at the rafters and said, that wood, it was trees before I was born in 1759. All that wood there is older than Robert Burns' life. And he's here in this room. And then they start dancing, and he watches Frank and everyone else start dancing, and he is thrilled because he loves dancing and music and having a good time. And then he looks outside, and there's a cemetery, the Grubb family cemetery, and he said, there are witches here and sprites. And he said, yes, the folks who came here, they're the radicals of the country. He said, this is great. This is my people. And he then remembers his narrative poem, Tam O'Shanter, which is a poem about witches and little kids. And he is enthralled and remembering the great life he had in those 37 years. And now he disappears and reappears again. And he's here right now. And he looks over and he said, there's Frank. Frank's now in the portrait. And there's Will. He's in a portrait too. It must be a very different time. And he asks, what goes on here? And we tell him, there's a community library over there that anybody can get a book for free. There is a dance floor, and there are Scottish dancing and folk dancing and concerts. And there's a writer's guild and a scholars guild and Shakespeare and these guys, Gilbert and Sullivan from London a little later in life. And they are all here, and this place celebrates that. And Robert Burns is just amazed. He said, this is heaven. We say, no, it's Arden. This is the Arden Club. And he said, listen, Sonny, I've been dead for 220 years. I know heaven when I see it. You're in heaven. And Robert told me to tell you that he thanks Mary and Stuart Craig and their family and all of the helpers for 40 years of celebrating Robert Burns' life and legacy. So Robert Burns said, as a ghost, he's going to sit up on those bleachers, on the rafters here, the old rafters, and watch the toast to the lassies and the reply from the lassies, and then enjoy all the dancing. And he'd like to have a wee bit of whiskey as well. And so we toast with whiskey, which is actual whiskey, the immortal memory of Robert Burns. Thank you.